This is the Louie Tee Network.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to Lockdown Coverage Week number 13 in the National Football League. The Oakland Raiders looking to get the double-digit victories on the season with a win, taking on the Buffalo Bills. Hasn't been pretty of late, but they've been W's. A couple weeks back, getting it done on the road versus Cincinnati. Last week, sleepwalking for a half of football versus Jacksonville. Both W's, and now, all of a sudden, Bills find themselves smack dab in the middle of the wild card chase in the AFC. A win here would put them at 7-5 and give them an outside shot of getting in. A loss would drop them to 6-6 and really do some serious damage to their playoff hopes. So this was a big one for them as well. We'll break this one down here shortly, but first, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the Louie Tee Network for more great content in 2016 and beyond. Look, we changing the game over here. I want you to be a part of that by hitting that red subscribe button and becoming a member of the Louie Tee Network. Also, I'm on Twitter at In The Lab Room is the Twitter handle. Go ahead, follow me on Twitter, and I'm also on Facebook. In The Lab Room is the Facebook page. Go ahead and give me a like there as well. All my social media platforms right up above in that center console, scrolling across the screen so you can't miss them. So let's jump into this game, and we will start with the victors, the Oakland Raiders, who get the win, go to 10-2 on the season with a 38-24 victory. And man, I'll tell you what, at first blush, again, watching another game, seeing the score transpire at the bottom of the screen, it was somewhat fascinating to see this game transpire, actually not watching and just wondering what happened. I was dying to watch this game because, you know, as I'm watching the Redskins and the Cardinals game, I'm seeing the score, and it's a low-scoring affair in the first half, and then the Bills explode for 2 touchdowns to start the second half, and just like that, it's 24-9, and I'm saying to myself, okay, they're going to win this game. And I thought that the Bills were going to win this game, so it wasn't that big of a surprise, but I'm like, wow, they're dominating the Oakland Raiders. And then I literally didn't look at the score for about a good 15 minutes. And the next time I saw the score, it was 38-24, and it was like an avalanche of points out of nowhere. It happened so quickly, and I was fascinated. I wanted to know what in the hell. I had initially thought, okay, the Bills must be turning the football over left and right, just giving up short field after short field after short field, and the Raiders are taking advantage and scoring touchdowns. But that wasn't necessarily the case. There were some turnovers, but the Raiders actually just went out and got stops and were able to take the football, make some big plays. Cooper with a big catch and run for a touchdown. They were able to make some big. There was Khalil Mack continues to show up. Speaking of which, let's start there. Khalil Mack continues to show why he is an elite player in this league. And look, the Raiders defensively don't scare anyone, nor should they. Okay, they're not where they need to be defensively yet to be considered one of the better defensive teams in the league. That being said, the difference between the Raiders and let's throw another team out there like the Redskins is they have an elite player on defense, okay? And the Redskins have Josh Norman, and you can talk all about that all you like, but Josh Norman still is reliant upon the pass rush because no one can cover for 4 or 5 seconds. You just don't want to put your guy in that kind of position. With the Raiders, they don't have anyone elite in the secondary, but they have a guy that can change the game up front, and that's where it's at. That's where the moneymakers are. That's where guys get paid big money in this league, is at the premier position of pass rusher, whether it's a defensive end or outside linebacker. You need one of these guys. And if you look at the best teams in the AFC, just look at the AFC West, just to stay there for a second. Look at what those teams are doing and look at what they all have in common, okay? Each of them find ways to win differently, but the common denominator is that all of them have one guy that scares the hell out of you as a pass rusher. And really, if you want to be good in this league, you need to have one of those guys And the Broncos have one in Von Miller. The Chiefs have one in Justin Houston. They really have two this year with Dee Ford coming on as he has been. And the Raiders have Khalil Mack. And last week we saw his impact, the pick six, the strip sack, forced fumble at the end to secure the victory. This week, more of the same. In the end zone, gets after Tyrod Taylor, hits him as he's throwing the football. Ball goes sky high into the air, picked off by one of the Raiders safeties. Forget his name. But nonetheless, Nate Allen picks it off, sets up another scoring opportunity for the Raiders. And then late in the game, as the Bills are trying to make it interesting, Khalil Mack once again with another strip, sack, forced fumble, and putting the game essentially away for his team. That's what you need. You need difference makers in the front seven, preferably one that can get after the quarterback. But if it's Luke Kuechly, fine. You'll take one of those guys as well. But you need an impact player in the front seven. And the Raiders, despite not having the best of defensive units, they have an elite player, a guy that can change the game. And that's what you have to have. If you're going to overcome deficiencies on the side of the football, you need to have elite players help you mask some of your deficiencies. The Raiders still can't stop the run, okay? They gave up over 230 yards rushing in this game. Shady McCoy got him for over $1 and some change. Mike Gillespie had another strong game. Tyrod Taylor chipped in with 30 of his own rushing yards. They gave up over 230 yards rushing this game. They still can't stop the run. If you're dedicated to running the football, you can have success against this Raiders football team. That being said, they have an elite football player on that side of the ball in Khalil Mack in the front seven. And if you don't take care of him, all it takes is one play. One time where you don't block him correctly and he wins and he can change the ball game. And that in itself is a game changer for this Raiders football team as he continues to wreak havoc on teams in the second half of this season. Let's talk about this Raiders offense because it was quiet for the first half. And we know about the slow starts to games for the Raiders. That's been a theme for them this season. More times than not, they've started games off very slowly and come on strong like gangbusters in the second half. Last week, it was actually the opposite, where they started out like gangbusters, had the injury to Derek Carr, things slowed down, he came back in, and they resumed where they had left off in the first half. So this game was a little bit more like the rest of the season, unlike last week, which was an anomaly. This game was slow start by the Raiders offense, settling for field goals. Second half, they explode, and Derek Carr starts to make some beautiful music. Now, I will tell you this, the penalties hurt them in the first half because they had a nice connection from Derek Carr, the 4-car AC/DC connection to Amari Cooper on a nice catch and run inside the 5. It gets negated because of a penalty of a legal shift by the Raiders. So it brings that play back. So you had some situations where penalties also hindered the Raiders, and we've seen that in the past as well, them being the most heavily penalized team in the league this season, which is a common theme for them over the years. So that's something they're going to need to cut out if you want to start winning games in the playoffs, because again, it's one thing to beat the Buffalo Bills, it's one thing to beat the Carolina Panthers, these teams that aren't going to be in the playoffs, teams that aren't going to be playing January football. It's another thing when you're playing the Broncos or the Patriots or the Chiefs or one of these teams that's going to be good. And this is going to be a great test coming up on Thursday Night Football, one of my most anticipated games of the season from a primetime standpoint. Chiefs at home versus the Raiders, first place on the line. It doesn't get much bigger than this. This is going to be so much fun to watch. Cannot wait for this game. They're going to have to scale back those penalties, and they're going to have to protect Derek Carr. They did that in this game. They didn't give up any sacks. They were able to generate some turnovers, and that's key, again, for a defense that isn't as good. The great equalizer, as I call it, is turnovers. Raiders haven't been that great in that department this season, but they're starting to become a team that's forcing some turnovers. We saw that last week versus Carolina. They did it again this week versus Buffalo. That could be something else that they can explore and exploit defensively to help them overcome some of those issues. But offensively, this team is dynamic, but they have to stop dropping the football. Right now, coming into this game, they had 18 drops, which was fifth most in the league. Well, at one point in this game, there were 5 drops. Now, all of the drops that they classify as drops, I don't know if I necessarily agree. Seth Roberts had one down by the end zone. Is that really a drop? I'm not sure. I mean, that was great coverage by the defender. I thought he had a lot to say in the matter. Crabtree, however, is a different story. He went from the guy that was probably the most shorthanded early in the season to a guy that is having concentration lapse after concentration lapse. Eventually, he'll catch the football, but look, once you get to the postseason, you get opportunities, and you're not going to get those opportunities over and over again like you do against bad teams or teams that aren't going to make the playoffs. You get certain opportunities. You get a finite number of opportunities. If you don't take advantage, you may only get 2 opportunities to make big plays, and if you drop one of them, you just messed up. And so for this Raiders team, they got to start taking advantage of situations. We know Seth Roberts doesn't have the best set of hands. He's going to drop 1 or 2 every now and again. Crabtree needs to catch the football. He's better than that. He needs to concentrate, catch the football. If he continues to struggle there, this could come back to haunt the Raiders down the line in a big spot where a guy doesn't come up with a catch. We've seen the catch, drop epidemic here with the Raiders of late. Excuse me. Cost them. I'd hate to see them have an issue with that going down the stretch of the season and have it cost them a chance of winning this division. So that's something else to talk about. But big performance by the Raiders. Defense stepped up, forced some turnovers. And again, when you're not as good defensively, that's the way to level the playing field, generate turnovers. Raiders do that by taking care of the football. And they're one of the best in the league at doing that, taking care of the football and then generating turnovers. That's something they haven't done as well this season. They had a little run there where they were creating all these turnovers early. Then the well kind of ran dry. Now they're starting to create turnovers again. So we're going to see if the Raiders can keep up with that as they get it done in this football game, 38-24. You go to the Bills in this game, they were living dangerously coming into this game. They barely beat Cincinnati. They barely scored enough to get it done there. The next week, they walked through the first half, and I'd said this on the breakdown of that game. If you play this way against good teams, you're going to lose because you can't play a half of football. You have to play 4 quarters or a full game in order to win in this league. They played a half versus Jacksonville, and that happened to be enough for them to win. They played a half in this game, essentially. The first half was okay. It wasn't great. The third quarter, the start to it at least was good, and then they kind of fizzled out then, and they allowed the Raiders to take advantage of them. And I just thought that they had an aggressive mindset early on in the football game and even early in the third quarter. And then they kind of just said, all right, let's try to run the football. And once the Raiders started loading up the box, they needed to take a shot or 2 down the field to loosen them up, and they never did that. And I thought the Raiders said, okay, we see what you're trying to do. You want to run the football. We're going to challenge you to beat us vertically. And I didn't think the Bills were equipped to do that in this game. And that's a problem right now for me with the Bills is that they need to stretch the field vertically some more. They have a guy that throws a beautiful deep ball in Tyrod Taylor. But right now, it's short to intermediate game. I've said this so many times with the Bills because it's usually the case. Your running back can't be your leading rusher and receiver every game. That's a problem. Okay? Sammy Watkins came back last week, against Jacksonville, had 1 big catch, but other than that, take that 1 big catch away, and McCoy's probably your leading receiver last week as well. That can't be the case every week. And I know you're hurting at the receiver position, which is part of the reason you had brought back Percival Harvin at one point. But this is something that has to change with this Buffalo Bills football team. They've got to be able to throw the football more effectively to create more space for the run game. Even though the run game is effective on its own, at some point teams are going to be fed up with getting run on. They're going to start loading up the box, bringing that extra defender down, and you have to make them pay for doing that. And the Bills just simply aren't doing that right now. Not enough with enough regularity to scare teams enough to say, all right, we got to keep these safeties back. And so that's a problem for them offensively. 24 points, usually a good number for them with the way that the defense usually plays, but you're not playing a normal offense. You're playing the Oakland Raiders offense, which is one of the best in the league. And that 24 points wasn't enough. And so you needed to do something to turn the tide in this game. You needed to generate a turnover. You needed to do something. And they weren't able to do that in this game. And so that's pretty disappointing from the Bills' standpoint of things. You know, you got a 13-point lead. You're up 24-9. You got all the momentum, and you can't get a stop. You can't get a stop, and then your offense starts turning the football over, and all of a sudden your lead evaporates. And it doesn't just evaporate. you're now down 14. So you're talking about a 27-point swing in this game. Is what essentially amounts to what happened to them in this game. You go from up 11, or excuse me, a 25-point swing. You go from up 11 to down 14. And or wait a minute. What kind of math am I doing here? You were up 13, then you were down. So like I said before, a 27-point swing. That's huge. Okay, that is huge. Raiders go from down 13 to up 14 in a matter of what seemed like minutes. It was an avalanche of points, and the Bills had no answer. And that's pretty frustrating. That's pretty frustrating for a group that is supposed to pride themselves on playing defense, getting after teams, forcing turnovers, and an offense that's supposed to be able to run the football, an offense that's supposed to be able to set teams up for play action fake shots down the field. I haven't seen enough of that. You know, you've got guys that can stretch the field. Haven't seen enough of Goodwin running the 9 route or a deep post. Haven't seen enough of Samuel Watkins catching the deep ball. Haven't seen enough shots. I want to see shots. Take some shots, some risk down the field. You run it so well, play action fake should be a given for this team. I don't see it enough. I don't see Tyrod Taylor airing it out 45 yards down the field enough for my liking. And because of that, teams are starting to pack it in and dare you to beat them deep, and you're not up to the task. And it proved to be deadly in this game because once the Raiders made a conscious decision to stop you from running the football and force Tyrod Taylor to beat them, you weren't able to do so. And they ran away with this football game. So, really disappointing effort by the Bills after building a 13-point lead early in the third quarter to not only see the lead evaporate, but not score another point the remainder of the game and allow the Raiders to win this thing comfortably. That's very disappointing, surrendering 29 second half unanswered points. That's not winning football at all if you're the Buffalo Bills. Let's get to any comments made. And no comments. So it's really simple. With this win, the Raiders keep pace with the New England Patriots. And not only do they keep pace, they set up the showdown of all showdowns this season on primetime television. The 9-3 Kansas City Chiefs hosting the 10-2 Oakland Raiders with the division on the line, essentially. This is a huge game. Division lead going to be on the line, but if the Chiefs win this game, they will own the season series over the Raiders and would have swept them, which would be huge in a tiebreaker scenario. So this is a big game. Raiders win this game, they will take a 2-game lead over the Kansas City Chiefs, and for all intents and purposes, put some really big breathing room and space between them and the other 2 competitors in that division. They'll then have a 2-game lead minimum on the rest of the division. And so this is a huge game. This could really go a long way in determining who's going to be the AFC West champion this season. I cannot wait. Bart Scott can't wait. It's for the Bills. This one doesn't end your season, but it puts you definitely close to the end of your season at 6-6 with the way the rest of the AFC conference is shaking out, with the Denver Broncos at 8-4, with the Kansas City Chiefs at 9-3, with the Oakland Raiders at 10-2. You've got to assume at least one of the wild card spots is going to come out of that division. I'm one that thinks both of the wild cards are coming out of that division. And so for you to get your hands on one, that means you're going to have to leapfrog at least one of those teams in that division. The closest one to you right now, the Denver Broncos, sit at 8-4. You're going to not only need to win out, you're going to need some help just to catch up to the Broncos. And there are other teams that are still ahead of you. The Miami Dolphins, i.e. the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Baltimore Ravens. There's a lot of work to be done for you to get one of those wild card spots. I just don't see it happening. This was a big, I don't want to say must win because you can still get in without it, but this was a really want type of football game, a game that you really needed to get. You didn't. And so now it's going to be tough sledding for the Bills the remainder of the way. Raiders get it done, 38-24 after trailing 24-9 in the early stages of the third quarter. They went on a hot streak, running off 29 unanswered to end this game and win 34-20 or 38-24, taking their record to 10-2, setting up a huge Thursday night football matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs. That ought to be a lot of fun. Meanwhile, the Buffalo Bills drop this game and go to 6-6, and the future's pretty bleak for the season. But we'll see what happens with this Bills football team moving forward. That's going to do it for me here on Lockdown Coverage. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the lab room. Come back and join me as I continue to break down anything and everything in the National Football League. We'll see what happens with these teams moving forward. Man, I cannot wait for Thursday Night Football. That should be a dandy. Raiders at Chiefs. Remember, we're changing the game one live feed at a time. Got more games to break down, including Giants, Steelers, and also another game in that 4 o'clock hour, Bucks and Chargers. Both of those games were good contests. So I'll see you for those two to wrap up the 13 slate from Sunday. And then we'll get ready for Monday Night Football, a game that no one is looking forward to. But I'm still on the clock, so I'll see you for that one as well. I'll see you a little bit later on. Got more games to break down. Enjoy. I'll see you then. Have a good one.